I feel that in every single season of Bridgerton that's ever aired, there's always one or two massive storylines that very much divide the fan base and are very controversial with no real clear consensus about who's in the right and who's in the wrong. One of the big storylines coming out of season 2 was of course the Penelope versus Eloise discourse. Then last season there was a lot of Penelope/Eloise/Colin versus Cressida discourse. I often feel as if the fandom's prone to well and truly whipping itself up into a frenzy more often than not in some of these discussions, and a lot of nuance and comprehension sort of gets tossed out the window. So I often like to take a look at some of these story beats and character arcs and see whether they really do come across like the fanbase often says, or whether it's simply baseless hysteria. This in turn brings me to the topic of today, Edwina. One of the big storylines that played out across the second season was of course the love story of Anthony Bridgerton and Kate Sharma. Bridgerton centres each season around a sole romantic pairing, and they were up next. However, Bridgerton being Bridgerton, they had to make things a bit more complicated and toss in a love triangle story. Now, this is apparently not how it goes down in the books, but I've never read them, and so I don't really have much of a point of reference for it. That being said, it is apparently much less of a triangle there. From what I understand, he tries it on with Edwina, but it's clear that he's vibing with Kate, and so it's not going to work out. Like I said though, I've never read it, and instead I'm just working off what other people have said about it on posts on social media and the like. Regardless of how it goes down in the books, it plays out rather differently in the show. Born and raised in India, Edwina is the product of a fairly scandalous marriage between the Lady Mary and Edwina's father, who was of a far lower social rank. From what I can see, this guy ended up dying rather prematurely, leaving Kate to manage their household and finances since Mary was unable to due to her grief. It's kind of a reflection of Anthony having to step up after the death of his own father, with his mother being unable to cope as well. As a result of this, Edwina is relatively sheltered and clearly views Kate as a second mother. The poor woman was parentified for sure. Kate is eventually able to make contact with Edwina's grandparents who, now that the fella's out of the way, are willing to pay the dowry for Edwina should she make an advantageous match. This is why they return to London for the social season, which kicks off the main events of the plot. Hosted by Lady Danbury as her special guests, it seems that Edwina is being a bit more pragmatic about her choice of partner, wanting to find a titled man who would probably be rich and thus could support her and her family. Meanwhile, Kate, who loves her, wants her to have an actual love match. At the Queen's Ball, Edwina is unexpectedly named the Diamond of the Season, which in turn attracts a whole host of suitors who are very eager to win her hand. Of course, amongst these suitors is Anthony, who Kate's already written off as a rake and a cad who's not worthy of her sister's hand. Thus, Anthony begins his quest to try to win Edwina and Kate over, with more success with the former than the latter. That being said though, Kate and Anthony are clearly vibing with one another, but he's in severe denial due to his own issues, and so rather stubbornly continues to pursue Edwina, who doesn't notice the growing heat between Anthony and her sister. She instead mistakes this for a rivalry and a bit of a dislike. Whoops. Edwina seems to settle on Anthony as her choice, and they all go to Aubrey Hall for a ball that Anthony's going to host. There, Edwina tries her best, but of course we and much of the Bridgerton family can see what's happening. That is that Anthony and Kate are rapidly falling in love to the point of utter ridiculousness. Despite all of this though, Lord Bridgerton still decides that he's going to propose to Edwina, and of course she accepts because why wouldn't she accept? The dude is the most eligible bachelor in the ton, and she'll be set for life, and her kids would want for nothing. Plus, it's not like Anthony's going to leave her family out in the cold either, so it's just the right choice. Well, as long as you can ignore the fact that he is 100% lusting after your sister, or, as I said, in this case just not noticing that fact. This of course then leads into the wedding planning and Anthony getting very jealous whenever Dorset's trying to court Kate. This leads to a disastrous dinner with the Sheffields where the truth about their money comes out and it's all very awkward and Edwina's angry at Kate for her deception. Here is where Edwina decides that she's actually in love with Anthony because of course she is. She's young and he's this handsome Chad sweeping in to yell at her awful grandparents and defend the honour of her family. We're building up the drama now and it's going to blow up in everybody's face. Of course it will. Because they actually get to the point where she is walking down the aisle of the wedding, ready to get married to this man, quite literally about to say her vows, but an act of God seemingly saves her as Kate drops one of her bangles and Anthony picks it up and they have a very obvious and over-the-top moment that even Edwina the Oblivious can notice. This of course leads to her running out of her own wedding and having a big clash with Kate. Well, I say clash, it's more just Kate apologising and begging and Edwina raging. This of course leads to Edwina finally rejecting Anthony and seeing the truth. However, it takes a lot longer for her to start down the road of forgiveness towards her sister, and it's only after Kate almost dies that she realises she almost lost her. It's a pretty stock standard type of storyline, but it was really well done and very compelling nonetheless. However, in the wake of the story, back in the days following the release of Season 2, I noticed there was a whole lot of hate being directed towards Edwina specifically. People saying they dislike her character, calling her selfish and stupid and willfully cruel, framing Kate as a victim in every single way, and thinking that she doesn't deserve any sort of redemption or forgiveness. I think it's pretty clear that a lot of people tend to get swept up in the moment when it comes to this sort of thing, eh? Shipping is a powerful thing that well and truly lets you overlook the flaws of your favourites and simultaneously hone in on the failings of those that stand in the way. Since Edwina's the one getting in the middle of the happiness of Kate and Anthony, she simply has to go. She's going to get no grace and far less understanding from the fandom compared to pretty much any character. So I guess that's the question we need to take a look at to try to formulate some sort of answer. Is the hate for Edwina Sharma justified? Did she do anything wrong? Was she really any worse than a lot of other players in the season? Okay, so let's dive in, shall we? We already had a rundown of everything that's going on, but before we go any further, I do think we need to have a discussion about age and the impact that's going to have on the characters. I think it should be made really clear that Edwina is, I think, an 18-year-old girl. I think that's the age she's supposed to be. She is 18. Meanwhile, Kate is 26, and I think Anthony is 29. That's a huge goal for age and experience and maturity. Does Edwina make some mistakes and act out in her hurt and anger? Yes. Does she behave badly at times? Yes. Is she overly naive with tunnel vision? Also yes. However, she is 18 years old. You only have to look at the numerous examples of real-life relationships where an 18-year-old girl is with some much older guy to see that experience matters a ton. Thus, when I see people who are all, I'm 18 and I would never behave this way, or my kids are that age and they would never, or I knew better than her at that age, she's just selfish, yada 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 yada, I have to roll my eyes and scoff. Bullshit. Bullshit, I say. Everybody likes to say that they were the most mature philosopher to ever walk the earth when they were that young. And it seems that many people do not outgrow that assumption. Meanwhile, I'll happily acknowledge that when I was 18, I was pretty stupid and naive, and I cringed looking back on the way I saw the world and interacted with other people. Every time you grow older, I swear you can look back on the last 3 or 4 years of your life in shock at how immature you used to be. I feel like this is a never-ending cycle. Is this not something others are able to do? I don't know, it's just strange, and I don't get why we don't view her character through that lens. Now anyway, let's try to address some of the common complaints in a bit more depth, shall we? First up, we'll go with this idea that she should have noticed that something had been going on with her sister and Anthony. I mean, she did, didn't she? And not just at her wedding. She noticed that there was some intensity and tension lingering between Anthony and Kate, but she misinterpreted what it was. She figured that it was lingering animosity. After all, she knows that they didn't get off on the right foot at first, and so therefore, it must be some sort of breach that's yet to be healed. Also, it's not like she's standing there watching their every move and some of their more intense stuff. The hunting, the garden, the library, those are all mostly private affairs, aren't they? I feel like most people underestimate how people can miss the obvious when they aren't looking for it. After all, she trusts her sister and Anthony. Why in the world would you think that there's anything going on when he's still pursuing her romantically? What kind of psycho would do something like that? She would also expect that her sister at the very least would clue her in. Yeah, Kate tries to discourage her, but that just plays into the idea that she doesn't like him. She trusts that nobody's going to actually let the relationship get this far. So in that regard, Anthony is just such a piece of shit for this. Manipulating a much younger woman into marrying him when he has no expectation of ever being able to love her, and when he's actively lusting after her sister. My God. I honestly think she'd have good reason to never want to speak to this man ever again. And why would she? Dude absolutely used and humiliated her. I do think that he gets off relatively scot-free in these sorts of discussions because we see his past trauma play out on screen with his dad's death. But if this was a real person, they'd be considered reprehensible. I'm not saying I hate the character, and honestly he's probably my favourite character in the show. I was sad about him getting such a reduced role in season 3. But come on now, if we're going to hate this hard on Edwina, surely there has to be some sort of acknowledgement that he was far worse in every respect. This in turn brings us to the real reason I think everybody hates Edwina so hard. When she feels betrayed by Kate, she calls her half-sister and tries to lessen their connection and bond. I will admit that in my eyes this is a pretty low blow and would be a hard thing to walk back if it was me. Yeah, you can be mad about that, but I think people are fond of using this as a deflection as well. They hold this up and they say, look, Edwina's clearly a user that doesn't love her sister at all. She doesn't care about her in any way, shape or form and only cares about herself. She was only out for herself all season. She ignored her sister's obvious signals. She's so selfish, spoiled, rah, 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 rah. I do wonder if some of these people might be projecting when they say these sorts of things. I get that she pushes too far, but everything else? Her rather severe anger? I do feel like it's somewhat justified, is it not? I mean, here's the reality. I think the season makes it very clear that Kate was one of the major guiding influences for Edwina once her father died. Mary sort of let things slip away, I think, and so Kate had to step up. And that's not Edwina's fault, that's more of a Mary issue, isn't it? Regardless, this positions her to trust that Kate's always going to have her best interests at heart. You'd assume so, at least. She ends up going for the guy who has expressed interest, but also seemingly has made it rather clear that he's not after a love match. He's being pragmatic and she's marriage material based on her temperament and her virtues alone. Kate continually tells her that he isn't the right fit for her, but she doesn't listen because obviously she ends up getting a little bit smitten with him and he's also just the pragmatic choice for her too. Along the way, however, Kate starts getting dangerously close and they're clearly vibing. And I'll be honest, in this context, I don't think it matters. Before the engagement, feel free. The guy clearly does not care about her sister at all, and so she should just tell her that and then feel free to pursue him at her leisure. That isn't what happens though, is it? Instead, she goes full denial mode and just doesn't say anything. She could have told her in the lead up to the proposal. She could have told her after she accepted the proposal, and so they could have resolved things more amicably without all that scandal. She could have told her numerous times in the lead up to the wedding, but she doesn't. Instead, she decides to play the martyr and return to India as the lonely spinster while simultaneously dooming her sister to be married to a dude who will probably pine after her forever. It's one thing for her sister to marry somebody who could never love her. I think that's common in that day and age. But to be somewhat fooled into marrying a man who is in love with her sister and they both never said anything when it could have just easily been resolved by them getting married themselves? Nah. Then this leads to them getting humiliated at a wedding being hosted by the Queen in front of everybody who's notable in all of high society. Yikes. Also, when the betrothal's broken, who's going to look worse? The dude? Unlikely. Good chance rumours are going to spread saying that he found out something about her or something along those lines that led to a crash and burn at the wedding. They'd get wrapped up in scandal and it could wreck their lives, especially since they're poor. It's absurd that it goes on for this long, and even though yes, Edwina takes it a bit far with her othering her sister and calling her half-sister, at the same time, who wouldn't be absolutely furious? It's ridiculous. It's not like you could get an easy, quickie divorce in this day and age. Once it's done, it's done. Bad luck. And look, I'm not hating on Kate. The real villain here is actually Anthony. Bro, you're 30 years old. Get it together, man. I just think it's crazy to see how Edwina is still villainized to this day. The slander must end. She did nothing wrong. Well, almost. Of course, though, with all that being said, these are just my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What do you think of the Edwina versus Kate and Anthony debacle? Do you agree with me? Is the Edwina hate overblown? Or maybe you disagree. Maybe you hate her with the burning passion of 1,000 suns. I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.